Hello again, it's your friend Nika Knox with Substitute Ed, and I finally have time to do another video. Just a couple prefaces with this video. I have my window open, it's very hot, I was outside gardening. I'm a little warm, so if you hear traffic, that's what that is. Hi, I hope you're having a great day, great week. It's a Monday. I don't know what day it is for you, depending on when you watch this. But I'm tired. Summer's great. It's nice to be off from teaching, but I still haven't gotten into the swing of my summer yet. So I also just did 2 days of a yard sale, so but that's why I'm so red in the face, in case you couldn't tell. So but yeah. My video today, I'm going to talk about the process of becoming a substitute teacher. Obviously, my process may look different than your process, depending on what state you live in. They have different rules and criteria for who's allowed to be a sub and how you go about applying for it. So I can only speak from the state that I am in, which is in Michigan. And you will have to check on the regulations in your state if you're interested in becoming a sub. There are some states that require you to be a fully credentialed teacher in order to apply to become a substitute teacher and to work in districts. And then some do not require that. Michigan does not require you to be fully credentialed. It does require you to have a certain number of college credits in order to apply. So it's 60 college credits here in Michigan. And so you have to have college experience. You have to prove your college experience in that process. So here in Michigan, I had more than 60. I went to college out on the West Coast, and when I got laid off during the pandemic, as I talked about in my last video, my mom heard that they were looking for substitute teachers, and I thought it might be something I would be good at. So I obviously had that. I had those credits to be able to do it. So the process here, because at least in the districts that I work in, they do not hire substitute teachers directly in as employees. They go through an outside company. So there's different ones. The contracting company that I go through hires all kinds of different school staff that they contract out to the district. So I can work in multiple districts through this same company. So with that, it's something to check in on in your state, whether they hire directly in or they do outside company. A lot of the process will probably be the same, whether you're an outside company or hired in by the district. You just don't tend to get the benefits of working for a school district that like a teacher might get. So health insurance or being a part of a union or, sick leave, things like that, depending on your state. There's a lot of documents, as I said, that you do have to get together, your college transcripts, or obviously if you're a credentialed teacher, you'll want to have that information available for either that outside company or the school district. ID, you'll need to get background checked and background checked and fingerprinted. So this is normal procedure. If you've never worked in a school before, all staff who work in a school have to be background checked, fingerprinted, and cross-referenced with like the FBI database, that kind of thing. So it's not a big process if you've never been fingerprinted before. They'll usually, if you're working with that contracting company, they'll tell you where you can go, give you a list of different places. You will have to pay for it yourself. They do not cover it, at least mine doesn't. And that process can take some time for that to be done and go through. Depending on the school district, if you're hiring directly into a school district, you're relying on an HR department, that can also take time. So if you're interested in doing it, if you want to try and substitute next school year, get that process started now, because I've seen so many people get kind of stuck on this process of the fingerprints and getting all of those documents together and getting it all through either HR or your outside company. Mine did not take that long to get it totally done. I think a couple weeks between the fingerprinting and that kind of thing. But you never know. So start early if you're interested in subbing like for next school year. The fingerprinting process, there's specific companies that do it. You're going to go in, they have a little machine, they help you kind of roll your fingers on the thing, get all your fingerprints in, they'll give you a receipt so that you can show it to, an HR or the company or whatever, and they'll have you fill out paperwork that says, where are we sending these fingerprints to? Like, who needs to have them? I actually had to go in a second time for my fingerprints because the person that I was working with when I went to go get mine done was not super experienced, and they ended up being not usable. So I ended up going in a second time, and I've actually been fingerprinted a third time because I was working with a nonprofit group that does like after school teaching support for kids. So they required me to again go be fingerprinted for their purposes because they have a different system that they have to have that information to send for their grants and that kind of thing. So just be prepared. Lots of fingerprinting. It's pretty quick. In and out, I think, 10, 15 minutes, as long as you get somebody who's pretty experienced. So not a big deal. As I said, can take a long time to come back depending on their backlog. So GCNs is another thing that we are required here in Michigan to do, and I think is probably required in a lot of states, if not all. These are training that you are required to do as a person working in a school. So things like sexual harassment law, the bloodborne pathogens, active shooter type of situations. There are required ones that you have to take every so many years or so many months, depending on the district you work in. The state may have different rules than the district. So if you're working directly with the district, then they may require you to do your GCNs every year to re-up, just in case there were changes or just to make sure that you remember. So the state may have different requirements. So if you are working for an outside contracting company for it, they may not require you to do it every year. It may be whatever the state says, every 2 years, every 3 years, or whatever. So I just had to re-up a couple of mine, which was, sexual harassment and civil rights discrimination. They're quick. They're usually videos. I think one of them took like 20 minutes, and then they have a little quiz at the end to make sure that you were paying attention. I assume they're different in every state because each state's information is going to be different. So your GCNs that you have to do will probably look different than mine. Mine were very short, simple videos, with a person talking. So just have to get through them. The first batch is a lot of GCNs to do. So because it's your first time, there's just a lot of them that you have to take, and you may not have to touch them again for a couple years. But set aside a good chunk of time, because each of those may take 15, 20, 30 minutes a piece. And if you have 10 or 15 different ones to do, that can take up considerable time. And those are required for you to do your job. Something to keep in mind. The next process is filling out your general forms that you would fill out whether you are in a school district or an outside company. Things like your tax forms, your contact information, all of that kind of stuff. So those are normal, like which you would do with any other job. And then for mine, because I work with an outside company and not directly for the district, you pick what districts you would like to work in. So in our system, I can go through and look at kind of the available districts that work with that particular company. I may have 2 or 3, I may have 10. It just depends. And obviously you're going to want to think about your location, how often you want to work, what type of demographic or group that you would like to work with, what type of positions that you want to have. If you live in a more rural area, your options might be a little more limited unless you want to drive a ways to get to a different district. If you live in a city, then you might have, 4 or 5 different districts that you can pick from. I find that I get information on, charter schools or even sometimes private schools that kind of contract with them as well, that, they may need someone to cover a music class or something like that. So there's lots of options. There's lots of different grades you can try, lots of districts you can try. I started out picking the districts that were just kind of most convenient for me to get to. I didn't know what districts I wanted to work in. I didn't know that much about how they ran. So I recommend trying a few times in whatever districts work for you to commute to, and see which ones you like, because there's a different fit for everyone. Obviously, you can keep it wide open and jump here and jump there depending on what kind of teaching you want to do, if you want to do long-term subbing or short-term subbing. But I found that there's particular district that kind of fit how I function, or the environment worked best with how I am as a teacher, or how I am as a person, or was the friendliest, or the most diverse, or had the most jobs, or so that's something to keep in mind. And then you can also start to look at what grade levels, subjects you feel comfortable in. That can take time to figure out. I definitely have where I'm most comfortable. I haven't done a ton of middle and high school. I tend to stick with elementary, but a lot of people, it's the opposite for them. They want middle and high school. They want to be able to substitute in an English class, teach the same kind of thing, 45 minutes, okay, next class. They like that better. That's totally understandable. Different people will gravitate towards different things. Some people really like to do art classes or gym classes, or because it's new and different, and there's maybe a little less rigidity, a little less structure, or because it's a special, so kids are maybe a little more engaged, and maybe you really love music, so those are things to think about before you jump into substitute teaching, is where your preferences are. You generally find people kind of, I want elementary, I want middle, I want high school. But try a little bit, because you may find that you have skills that you can utilize in both, and it may not be your preference. But when it comes to picking jobs, you may not always have your preferred job available. So if you can be flexible in that sense of letting yourself try different grades, different schools, different districts, you'll start to build up that rapport with schools, with teachers, and kind of get those preferred jobs a little bit more. The other thing to think about is long-term versus daily or short-term. Long-term, generally speaking, for me, has been sort of anything more than like a week. Any instance where they're going to expect that you are able to do lesson planning, have contact with parents, do the same types of activities and jobs that the teacher themselves would be doing, that would be classified more as a long-term. Daily is this teacher's gonna be out for a couple days for some appointments, or they have a funeral, or they're out for one day kind of thing, and you're gonna pick up those individual jobs. They should have lesson plans for you. Those things should be provided, and you just go in, follow the lesson plan, do your thing, leave. You can take one day of that, you can do 2 days, but you aren't expected to kind of do those other duties that a teacher might do, like lesson planning. There is generally a considerable difference in pay rate between a long-term and a daily rate. So some districts, it may not be as drastic. And if you work for a district that just hires you on as a staff member, that isn't going to necessarily affect you, because they run theirs a little bit different. You're just another employee under the district. So this is a little bit more for those who are working for an outside contracting company. So I started out doing dailies. I pick and chose the ones that I wanted. I picked the grades that I felt comfortable with. I picked the schools. A lot of flexibility, which is one of the great things about being a substitute teacher, is having that flexibility to say, hey, I'm still in school, or I have kids, or I'm caring for a family member, or whatever, or I want to do super part-time. I want to do 2 days a week or something, and you just pick up what's available. It's very flexible, and it changes a lot. You don't get stuck in doing the same thing if you don't happen to like teaching at that school per se, or that particular grade level. You don't have to pick that again. Oh, I didn't really like doing gym. Wasn't really my thing. I struggled with it. I won't pick another gym class for a while. Long term, they're going to expect that you do a lot more than that. You will be expected to lesson plan and be prepared every day, and you're responsible for contacting parents and all the same kinds of things that happen in a classroom that a regular teacher would be doing. So it is a lot more work. It is a full-time job. You may only be in that particular job for a couple weeks. If somebody is coming back from a surgery or whatever. So it may not feel too big. There are definitely teachers who will plan all of those 3 weeks for you and have it ready to go. You may have to improvise occasionally here and there. But I've had jobs where the teacher was gone for a couple weeks for surgery. They had everything planned. Everything was copied, ready to go for me. There was a granny in the room who came every day. If I didn't know where something was, or I was confused about how something went, they were there. And so wasn't too bad. It was pretty easy. I think it was 4 weeks or 5 weeks. I had already been teaching for a couple of years by that point, so I was not my first rodeo. However, I have also taught for an entire school year in one classroom that didn't have a teacher because they had a vacancy. So my job was from that open house before the school year all the way to the end, doing report cards, doing lesson planning, planning, activities and being involved in the stuff in the school. So some people do not like taking that on. It removes a lot of the flexibility that you might otherwise have as a daily sub. So it's something to contemplate. Trying a long term at some point once you've kind of gotten used to doing dailies and comfortable with kind of jumping into a classroom environment and teaching on your own and that kind of thing is not a bad thing to do, because you don't know what you can do until you try. And as nerve-wracking as it is, it's incredibly rewarding to create relationships with those kids, give them that consistency, giving consistency to the school and to that teacher who, wants the best for their students, but maybe can't be there for whatever reason, because they're human beings. They have to take time off for things. That just is the way that it is. So those are all things to think about. We have a particular system that those jobs are put into where I can go into that system and I can select jobs. And I can say, I would like that one. Ooh, I would like that one. For myself, because I am a long-term sub for the most part, I don't select them myself. I get placed in that job. So I get contacted by said school district. They have a vacancy or they have a long-term chunk and they say, hey, can you take this job for 5 weeks, or can you be at this school for this much time? This is the grade, this is what you'll be doing. And I say, yep, sure, sounds good. And they place it in my particular account or whatever you want to call it. So it depends on your district how they handle that, whether or not they have a person that kind of is responsible for that or for the long-term jobs. But otherwise, daily, you're going to go in, you're going to pick your job, you're going to pick your grade, do your research before you pick jobs. A lot of times, teachers or principals or whoever put the job in sometimes will use acronyms that you may not be familiar with if you haven't taught in a school before. So, they might say that it's special education or something, but they won't say special education. They will use an acronym. So if you don't know what something is, you can always call the school and say, hey, I'm interested in this particular role. Can you tell me a little bit more about what would be expected of me? Doesn't mean you have to take it, but it does help you to understand what they want before you get there so you can be better prepared. And I will definitely be doing another video on how you can prepare yourself for your daily sub job, what you can put in your bag, and things to be aware of when you do your first sub gig. But do your research, ask questions. If you don't understand or don't know what's going to be expected, don't be afraid to call the school, because at least in the state that I work in, there is a large sub shortage, and they are so happy that somebody's interested in taking jobs that they will be happy to answer your questions. And if that one's not a good one for you, they may say, hey, we have one coming up at the end of the week for this particular grade or this particular kind of subject. Would you be interested in that one? So you can start to build that rapport with schools. So that's kind of the gist of how that works. It as I said, it can be a long process depending on whether you're going with the school district itself or with an outside company, pays vary pretty widely, even within the same community, whether you are working for a public school, a private school, a large district, a small district. Those things change, and from year to year it's changed. I've worked with the same school district for 5 years and my pay has changed multiple times. So that's something to also keep in mind, is that, things change from year to year, contracts get renegotiated with teachers, and that can sometimes change how they work with their subs. So you're not necessarily a part of that process if you're through an outside company, but it can change what the structure is of how they pay. So daily rate is generally, here's your flat rate for the day. Half day is this much, whole day is this much. And that's from bell to bell. Long-term sub gets more because long-term sub doesn't go bell to bell. Long-term sub is expected that they are doing plans or grading or doing whatever the regular teacher would do. So you would be working beyond bell to bell. So in the district that I'm in, there is a pretty big change, a big discrepancy versus the daily rate day pay. I still get paid by the day. So if I take a day off, I don't get paid for that day. But that means that that's something to definitely take into account. A lot of subs do not like doing the long term because it is very stressful. It can be very stressful. I really love making reports with kids. So I enjoy the consistency of a long term. I enjoy supporting teachers who need to take time off, and the kids get to know me, and I get to run a classroom, and I learn and I grow as a teacher. But I would not start jumping into long term. I would do daily until you start to figure out schools that you like and grades that you like and stuff, so that when you're ready, you can do a long term in one of those things. Oh, I love 5th grade. At these 3 schools, if someone had to go away for a leave, I would take a long term there, or they had a vacancy at the very beginning of the year or something. I would feel comfortable because I know the staff and I know what the expectations are. I understand their curriculum a little bit, that kind of thing. So, do your research in your own state. It can vary pretty widely. There are a lot of Facebook groups for teachers, substitute teachers, even have their own Facebook groups, and people will go on there and ask questions or give ideas for things. Things like, hey, I've never done this kind of class. What is that? Or, hey, what is this acronym? I don't know what that means. What does it look like? What's expected? So that's a great place to ask questions or to just kind of see what other people talk about the job. I find that in my particular state, in the district that I work in, most of the substitute teachers that I have run into are people who have graduated and are teachers. They are credentialed teachers, but they are looking for a position. They want a particular grade, or they're trying to move into a position. So they're working until they get there. The vast majority of those who sub are not just professional substitute teachers like myself. So that is something that's very different. Uncommon, I guess. You may find that's different where you are. But if you have questions or comments, or I would love to hear them, please leave your comments down below. I try to check those frequently. If you could help our channel out, like and subscribe, share it with your friends, share it with other people. Substitute teaching really is a fun profession that I really, really adore. But I think some people don't know how to get into it or what it looks like. And so I would love to support other substitute teachers in getting their footing and getting their start so that we can all kind of support education in general. It's so important. So thank you so much for joining me today. And yeah, you have a fantastic week, and I will be back with another video. If you have any recommendations for things you want to know, put them in the comments below and I'll take a look at it. All right,